Welcome back. So I'm going to do something different. I'm going to talk about wrestling. I'm going to be on the hockey set to talk about wrestling. So today it feels like I really need to do a video talking about what's going on in the wrestling world because big news, right? Vince McMahon stepping down. This is temporary, is his plan, and depending on who you ask in the business world, it might be temporary. It might be permanent, where he's stepped down and maybe he's gone. And this is one of the things about going from a territory booker and a guy who's in charge of a company to making it a publicly traded company with shareholders and a board and all that other fun stuff. And so this is one of those things, right? You have certain things you can do and you can't do with a publicly traded company. We've got all these employees that you could totally have got away with back in the 80s when it's territory days, right? And Vince McMahon, honestly, I think that he's been rich for so long. He has been in charge for so long that he probably feels like, yeah, no, I can do this. This is my company. Who are you to tell me? Now, tonight he's supposed to be on SmackDown. I will admit, I will watch to see what he has to say. I think that it is probably in part to get out ahead of this, but I think there's more to it than that. So the word is that he paid $3 million in hush money to a woman that was leaving the company that he'd had an affair with. And that this woman was a paralegal and her salary was doubled in April of 2021, which is where the legal problem comes in. So if it turns out that she had her money doubled as a result of the affair, so if it's out of line with everybody else and here's an extra 100K, that's jeopardy for Vince McMahon then. That is company money that's then involved in this scandal. And of course, again, their feet are going to be held to the fire by your investors and people on the board. Now, what's interesting with this too is Stephanie McMahon, who was seemingly forced out weeks ago and said she wanted to be home with her family, but there was a lot of discussion about whether or not she actually wanted out or if she was forced out. Now she's taking over. Now, I will say this. I have always thought that Stephanie McMahon, the character on TV could be aggravating. Her voice could be grating. The screaming, the just absolutely and there were times where I thought she was on TV way too much. But off screen and just in general in public, I've never heard anything bad said about Stephanie. She's well spoken. She seems to be very intelligent. She honestly, I thought back in the early 2000s, she might have been the best looking woman in the company. She had just everything I thought was there. And she even went in the ring and she was willing to wrestle. She didn't wrestle a lot. And she was never going to make you forget about like the greatest women wrestlers ever. But she still went in and took bumps. And she always has. And she's always been willing to be a good teammate, it seems, behind the scenes. So I've never heard anything bad about Stephanie. But Vince, lots. The funny thing is, there was a whole thread on Twitter about all these things that Vince McMahon had done. I knew 90% of the things in that thread because I've been a fan since the 80s, and I remember the steroid trials. I remember all of these things that Vince was involved in, and whether or not there was guilt, whether or not there was legal jeopardy. None of these things look good for Vince, and yet he's always had an ability to overcome them. Whatever tragic event happens in WWE, he seems to be Teflon. Nothing sticks to him. And maybe that's part of what we're seeing here. Nothing has ever stuck to him. He has always been able to overcome whatever challenge it is. Whether it's a legal battle, whether it's a court of public opinion battle, he wins them all. And he may have figured, I can, as you know, I'm a billionaire. I can do all this. I can get away with it. So maybe that's part of this. And it's interesting to me too because I've seen wrestlers over the years do shoot interviews where they'll say horrible things about Vince, and then 2 years later they're back working in WWE, maybe on a Legends contract. And I don't begrudge them, but it does make me wonder about when they were, smack talking about Vince, how much of that was, I don't know, like, is that 100% real? And it feels like there's two sides of Vince, that there's the one that takes care of some wrestlers and has done really well by some wrestlers, and then the one that other people can't stand working for. And so we've seen the rise of AEW, and AEW getting a lot of WWE wrestlers. Now, I will say this. I'm going to say this straight out. WWE releasing all the wrestlers they have, as horrible as it is for PR, I kind of get it, and I get it from this point of view. You only have a certain number of hours in any week. You only have a certain number of hours to build up an event, to build up wrestlers, to build up interest in things. So I think they've had too many wrestlers employed for a long time. AEW is now in the exact same situation. I've lost count of how many wrestlers that in my mind while I'm watching the show, I'm like, I'd really like to see that guy get a push. You can only push a certain number of wrestlers. So with all of this in the background, the word on Sasha Banks wanting to be released, and it's back and forth on whether or not she's been released. I understand her wanting to be released, and I would also kind of understand WWE being okay with her going at this stage. There are a lot of wrestlers. There are a lot of women wrestlers. Sasha Banks, for years, it's kind of looked like they don't know how to capitalize on her popularity. That, you know, she'll be in a tag team, she'll be in a big feud, and then it just kind of doesn't go anywhere. So for Sasha Banks, obviously there will be ties immediately. Immediately, once it's confirmed that she's released, immediately people will be like, so when's she showing up in AEW? And if you're Tony Khan, the answer should be as soon as she's free of that 90-day non-compete, she's got to go to AEW. And again, while the debate about whether or not AEW should pick up so many former WWE wrestlers, I think is a valid one, the reality is Sasha Banks can be a wrestler who drives ratings. She's very popular, and she's got all the tools that are necessary. I remember watching her in NXT, and it was about the third or fourth time I saw her in the ring that I realized there's something here. There's something different. And then she got cocky, she turned heel, and I was like, there it is. There's the personality coming out. And she's a natural heel. So while fans love her, I think she's a natural heel. And I think if she shows up in AEW, she can use her real name. That's fine. It doesn't matter. We'll all know who she is. And I think the star power will follow her. There's a lot made about the WWE versus AEW part of things. And I've said before and I'll say again, I think it's important to have two really profitable companies. Two companies that can legitimately offer a really good lifestyle to wrestlers. Now, if you wrestle for AEW, you may very well be able to go over and wrestle in New Japan. You might be able to show up on Impact. Obviously, with Tony Khan also owning ROH, that frees up some ability for wrestlers to move back and forth between shows. And AEW has shown that they are willing to work with other companies. Forbidden Door looks like it could be this huge big deal of an event that WWE, in that their whole thing is the WWE universe, and it's almost as if anything that exists outside of WWE doesn't really exist. I used to get a kick out of when a wrestler would leave WWE for 4 or 5 years. They would come back from, say, TNA, right? Or Impact. At this point, it's Impact Wrestling. But they would come back from Impact, and you would hear, well, we haven't seen him in 4 years. And I'm thinking, yeah, we have, just not in WWE. But they would treat it like this guy fell off the planet. Who knows? I remember when the Dudley Boys came back for their last WWE run, there was a lot of, oh, it's nice to see them finally back in the ring. And it's like, they've been in the ring the whole time. So AEW is far more likely to name drop other companies and wrestlers from other companies, which is fun. I like that. I like that a lot. I do think that there is something to some of the criticism thrown at AEW, just like there's something to some of the criticism being thrown at WWE. And whichever company takes that criticism and makes their product better as a result is, I think, the one that, I don't want to say win the war, because you don't have to have one company put the other out of business, but it would give them a leg up in the battle for ratings and for hearts and minds. Although I don't think AEW will ever get ratings that are higher than WWE just on name alone. People know what WWE is, they know who it is, and all of that. The branding's there. It's just, it's all part of our society, right? North America, you know what WWE is. It's known globally. AEW, it would take a long time for them to build up to that. And so Forbidden Door should be a great event. I'm not planning on ordering it at this stage. I could. It's possible I do. But at this point, I'm not planning on ordering it. But it should be fantastic. I also wanted to talk a bit about Cody Rhodes. So, coming back to WWE and what they can do right. And also AEW being mentioned in this too. Because for the last 3 years, I know I've seen a lot of posts from people who don't like AEW saying, well, no, AEW, look at this. You've got these guys from WWE, just go there, and all of a sudden they're the main guys. Just shows there's no real talent there, blah, 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 blah. Cody Rhodes goes back to WWE, gets a hero's welcome, wearing the same gear he wore in AEW, same hairstyle, everything. They didn't change him back. Now, I understand that in his contract, he's made it so they can't make him Stardust again. And agreed. I will agree with that. He made that work, but he should never be Stardust again. But Cody Rhodes being the face of the company, Cody Rhodes and the torn pec and the purple chest, and as painful as that looked, and just that Hell in a Cell match against Seth Rollins, which was fantastic. That doesn't happen without AEW. If Cody Rhodes had left WWE, and for the last 3 years, he and Brandy had been, say, starting up their own company, that wasn't involved in wrestling, and he was doing, say, contract work, or he started up a concrete company, or whatever it was, comes back to WWE, you don't get that reaction. The reaction Cody Rhodes gets is because when he left AEW, as one of the founders of AEW, goes back to WWE, that creates a lot of interest, which means that for people who say AEW isn't important or it's not of any consequence, it has to be. Because otherwise, Cody Rhodes wouldn't have been built up as the face of the company upon his return. And clearly, the way that they made him heroic in his exit, and they talked about the torn pec, and he's still like, Money in the Bank. And on some level, we're going, well, he couldn't be in Money in the Bank, because that's a 6 to 9 month recovery. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, maybe he wrestled with the torn pec. Why wouldn't he wrestle after he just had surgery? This is Cody Rhodes. He might be that crazy. Cody Rhodes right now could be the most over guy in WWE, which I find odd. I find odd because to me, he is exactly the same wrestler now as he was years ago when WWE let him go. I don't think that, on the technical side of it, I think he was always a very good wrestler. He was always a good talker. He was always good at getting fans to love him or hate him throughout his run the first time, but they saw him as a mid-carder. So he goes to AEW, he wins titles in AEW. There were some missteps in AEW, and by the time he left AEW, all Elite fans were kind of done with the whole thing. I think, honestly, they probably should have just turned him heel. I know he said no to it, but if he turned heel, who knows? He could have gone to the title. There could have been a great feud between he and Adam Page, but at any rate, he's back in WWE. They're happy with him, and I still say that Cody Rhodes rising to the top as a top babyface proves that what AEW is doing is the good thing. If Adam Page showed up tomorrow on Raw, the crowd would go crazy. They know who he is. He's from the other company. So while your casual fans, your sports entertainment fans might be like, I don't care, wrestling fans care. And I really think that once we get past, I don't know, do we ever get past the one company trying to destroy the other mindset? Once we get past that and we realize there's two companies now that can employ guys and make them some serious cash, it's a good thing all around. And we're going to see guys go back and forth. Yeah, maybe we see Joey Janela show up in WWE. Maybe there's other wrestlers there too who could end up being released and could end up in WWE. There are a lot of women on that roster in AEW who are, I'm not going to say buried because that's the wrong term, but there's just too many women wrestlers and not enough time. So it's possible that one of the women in let's say Kylan King ends up falling through and ends up over in WWE. And I'm just using that as an example of a wrestler. I'm like, I haven't seen her in a while. But it's possible that then that wrestler goes to WWE. They have some recognition because people have seen her on TV in AEW. And it allows her to go to, say, NXT, go through, climb the ladder, and then ends up in WWE's main roster sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of good things going on with the actual products. The stuff at the top is going to make things messy for a while. The good news is that let's just say Vince doesn't come back. Let's just say Vince doesn't end up being in charge again. Maybe that opens the door for wrestlers to be able to get some protections to be seen as actual employees. Because remember, they're still independent contractors who are independent but can't wrestle anywhere else without WWE saying okay, and they usually don't say okay. So that I mean, if you call somebody and you say, "Hey, can I go work over there?" and they say, "No, you work for me," you're their employee. That's always been the way that it works, right? I don't have to call former employees and say, or former employers and say, "Hey, I want to make YouTube videos today," and I'm gonna go, "Nah, you're coming in. Get on the floor." No, that's not how that works. So for these independent contractors, yeah, they're to me they're employees with WWE, and they should have the rights to all the same protections as employees. Now, should AEW do that as well? Yeah, probably yes. But again, as I've said, they do allow wrestlers to wrestle in Japan. They do allow wrestlers to do other things. There's more freedom. They're allowed to have all their social media and to have their income supplemented through that as well. So there are definitely some benefits on the AEW side. Obviously, on the WWE side, you have to think there's a larger sum of money that you could make in WWE than you can in AEW. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And not even on the board is the MJF stuff. Personally, I think it's a work. A work just meaning that, and I will agree with this part too, that it's probably a shoot, which is, you know, he actually is pissed off, turned into a work. Like, okay, we'll make this a storyline on TV, which is what could happen with Vince tonight. Vince could go to the ring and turn this whole thing into a storyline, and I don't know how that would be received by. I mean, fans probably fine with the line being blurred, but this is one of those things where if it's affecting the stock price, and I checked before I started this video, WWE stock dropped by about $2 today from where it finished yesterday. So if the stock starts to tank as a result of this, and Vince is on TV reminding everybody of it, I don't know how long that storyline would go. I would think that would probably be turfed pretty quickly. But it's a fascinating topic. And again, Dark Side of the Ring has done more to expose the underbelly of wrestling that every wrestling fan knew was there. But again, others may not have. And not only that, but sometimes it's like for people who watch The Office. Jim does all this stuff to Dwight, and it's funny. But then you get to that episode where they go through everything back to back to back, where they're going through everything Jim has done to Dwight, and it's a stack of papers, and Jim's like, you know, these are funny until you hear them all just lined up like that. Huh. And he realizes, you know, like, wow, I've done a lot of bad things to Dwight. And you end up kind of feeling bad for Dwight in that scene. So maybe with wrestling fans, we can just sort of look and go, yeah, there's a lot of stories. But then Dark Side of the Ring lines it all up, puts it into a 1-hour program, and we watch that and we go, huh, yeah, that's actually worse when they put it that way. That makes it sound, then they've got the dramatic reenactments. That's not great either. So I think that, and there's word too that a lot of wrestling personalities will not have anything to do with Dark Side of the Ring for season 4, and that show's kind of being, they're trying to force that show out because it's hurt the business. It's really brought to light a lot of things that's negative about the business. And I mean, I've watched episodes of Dark Side of the Ring with my wife, who doesn't have any interest in wrestling, but that behind the scenes stuff, she does enjoy watching that, the investigations and all that, and finding out, you know, about certain things that happen. And then, of course, for me, I've been watching wrestling since 1984, 1983, probably a little bit earlier than that. And so I can talk about a lot of this stuff. Go, oh yeah, I remember him. I remember that. The Dynamite Kid one that I watched, that was fantastic. Although there was stuff I didn't know with that one too. And I was kind of shocked by some of it, where I was like, wow, really? So again, longtime wrestling fans, Dark Side of the Ring, definitely makes you think about some stuff. But that's where we're at. That's where the business is at. And we'll see what happens from here. There's a lot of good investigative journalism going on with the wrestling world now. And I do wonder how much more dirt there is to dig up. There's probably a lot. I get the feeling with Vince that this one payoff is going to lead to, if they're looking through the books and if they look back far enough, there's probably going to be other things. Vince has run the company. There's been sketchy things all the way through, and it didn't matter in the 80s or early, you know, right up until 99 because it wasn't a publicly traded company. Now that it is, there might be some financials there that will have people asking some questions. So we'll see. But I'd be interested to know your thoughts because, again, doing this video today, on the main set here. I wanted to do this because I think it's important. And so I expect if Sasha Banks has been released, one of two things. Either she's in AEW in 3 months, or she's going to do something fantastic with her career. Because again, she was in The Mandalorian. She's got her foot in the door when it comes to the acting side of things. I think she'll do fine. And yeah, she's not that old. And I think the future's really bright for her no matter what she does. I'm always proud of wrestlers when they go, you know what? I don't need this. And they have faith in themselves. And very often they may come back to the company and they may come back making a lot more money than they did before with a much higher spot on the roster than what they enjoyed previously, like Cody Rhodes. So there you go. All comes back around. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below regarding this. Does Vince McMahon end up coming back as CEO? Does he just become an on-air personality? And honestly, if we find out that he can't be CEO anymore because he misappropriated funds within the company, how can you have him as an on-air personality as well? I don't think you can, but it's WWE. I just don't know. The moment that they had Eric Bischoff as a personality on TV after he tried to put them out of business, it's all up in the air. Who knows? Let me know your thoughts and your predictions. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.